Hi, this is Bill Varney from fishthesurf.com and your saltwater guide with your Thursday, June 26th surf fishing report. Well, this week once again remained a great week for surf fishing. I want to thank everybody who continues to send me surf fishing reports. I really appreciate that. You can post them right on the YouTube videos, or please feel free to send me a report at fishthesurf@mail.com. So thank you so much for that. So starting up in Santa Barbara, we get a lot of our information and help from Ben at Hook, Line, and Sinker, an excellent tackle shop on Los Pozos Road in Santa Barbara, right off the 101. I think it's the exit right before you get off for Upper State Street there, Highway 154, just right before that. Get off, go left, you'll find their tackle shop. It's got everything that you need for surf fishing. So let's start up in Santa Barbara. You know, the fishing remains very consistent up in the Santa Barbara area with grunion, squid, fin bait, all kinds of bait that is just offshore. I think that's part of the reason we've seen this incredible white sea bass bite over at the Channel Islands, is there is a ton of different types of bait in the water, and back on the Santa Barbara coast, much of that has been brought into shore. So there's been quite a few white sea bass caught, sublegal white sea bass, up to about 30 inches or so, caught in the Santa Barbara area, really from Gaviota, or excuse me, from Gaviota all the way down to the city of Santa Barbara. Even a report of a couple of them down in Summerlin and Carpinteria. So they're coming in closer to shore. There's a very good chance that bigger fish also will follow this Grunion Run that's happening right now and come to shore. So for sure, and be close to shore, look for that. White and red swim baits have seemed to work really well. That's been kind of the consistent bait that we've seen on those white sea bass. And of course, those swim baits or the drop shot setup, those have all worked well, both for the white sea bass, really all along the coast, and also for the halibut. So keep that in mind for sure. Carpinteria, all the way down to the La Conchita area, has kicked out a couple of halibut down in that zone, so that's good news. That's kind of new for us to hear. There has been quite a few perch in that area, but of course they have diminished somewhat and become smaller, and looks like some of these halibut are really getting close to shore now following those Grunion Run in. And then the other thing, the big news up in Santa Barbara, was some really big leopard sharks caught up to 5 feet. And something to remember about those leopard sharks is that they love to feed at a high tide going to a low tide, and in particular in the dark. They love a high tide going to a low tide in the middle of the dark, in the middle of the night. That's a great time to fish for them. And a lot of anglers like to use just a setup with maybe a 6-0 to a 10-0 size hook, depending on the size of your bait, and then half of a mackerel or half of a bonita or a cut up perch. All of those will work really, really well in the surf. So that's what's been going up in Santa Barbara, and really the perch bite continues up there. Not big perch, but between the Gaviota Pier and Campus Point, one angler sent me a report this week and it said in 1 hour they had 20 palm-sized perch basically wide open as soon as they got their bait out there. So surf fishing continues good up in Santa Barbara, and really look for that to improve as that water warms up a little bit more and we see more Corvina come into that area too. As we make our way down into Ventura, Emma Woods State Beach has had a ton of crabs, but one of the problems really between Emma Wood and really all the way up to Gaviota has been the eelgrass and the kelp in the water. A lot of anglers have seen a lot of Corvina in that zone, but they really haven't had a shot at catching them because of the tangles and the kelp and the stuff in the water. So that should clear up. We're really kind of waiting for a bigger south swell to come up the coast. Certainly one of these hurricanes from Mexico in the next month or so should push all of that away, or at least a large portion of it, or get it into areas where you can certainly fish around it. The Ventura area also kicked out spotfin croaker on lugworms. We've now seen spotfin really all the way along the coast. Haven't seen them in Santa Barbara yet, but Ventura to the Mexican border, there's been quite a few of them. There's been stripers caught on hard baits up in that area. Remember, when you're striper fishing, the jetties is a good area, but also concentrate on areas where the rivers come out there. Lots of times they will feed there. They love that brackish type of water. And then halibut to 30 inches all along the Oxnard Shores area and the Ventura area. next to near both harbors has been really good for halibut fishing along there. As I said, 1 up to 30 inches. And once again, anglers are using those white flukes and the drop shot setup, and lots of white style swim baits up to 6 inches have worked really, really well up there. And then the big news for Ventura is the continued number of corbina caught up there. We've seen them caught up both on soft shell sand crabs and on the fly up there. Fish up to 22 inches, and as I said, really quite a handful of them in the last week. I've gotten a report, so that means there's probably about 3 times as many as those caught up in the Ventura area. So corbina fishing up there has been good for a month, continues to be good. And then down in Malibu, we finally got several reports from Malibu. That El Matador beach area all the way up to Point Magoo has been really good for perch, really palm-sized perch, a few bigger ones next to the rocks, but a lot of yellowfin croaker up there. And those anglers fishing yellowfin croaker, whether it's there, down the South Bay, San Diego, Orange County, they have all been really lucky using, I've seen some white swim baits, but more than anything else, those 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce crocodiles and cast masters have worked really well in the surf for those yellowfin croaker. They love hunting those down. So that's the thing you want to use. And then down at Will Rogers State Beach, we got a great report from down there where there's quite a few of those palm-sized perch, in addition to corbina in the surf. One angler catching several corbina this week there using sand crabs in the surf. So it really looks like those corbina have spread out from that from the Santa Monica Pier area, really all the way up above the Malibu Pier area. More and more corbina are filling in that area, and of course there's quite a few sand crab there too. So that's really what's been going on in Malibu, and it's really great to get some news from there. Please keep the reports coming from there. And then when we make our way down to the South Bay, of course, that Hermosa Beach and Manhattan Beach corbina fishing's been good. Once again, a really good place to pick up softshell sand crabs is underneath each one of those piers at high tide. That's the first place I look. Of course, they'll spread out all along the beach, but there's a lot of soft sand there. They're easy to catch there, and there's a lot of soft shells in that area. So try to get down there a day or two ahead of time, pick up some bait, and then go back at sunrise or near sunset and fish over those corbina with the sand crabs that you've already caught. Be prepared. You'll catch a lot more fish that way. And then when we make our way down to Torrance Beach, Rat Beach, right in that zone, there's been some halibut caught down there. I've been told there's been some striper seen down there. But the big news down that area is, once again, those big yellowfin croaker. That's what we had down there last summer. We've got them back again this summer. And once again, those spoons like the crocodile and the castmaster work very, very well down that zone for those big yellowfin croaker. So look for those. And then when we make our way down to Orange County, a little stop in southern Long Beach there from the Belmont Pier to 72nd Street, there's been quite a few halibut caught down in that area. Anglers have been using things like frozen grunion, crocodiles and castmasters, and then once again the white flukes, the white swim baits. But most of the fish have been sub-legals. It doesn't mean that there's not legals there, but there's been so many sub-legals, maybe from a spawn earlier in the spring. That's what people have been connecting with. And then when we go south of there, we really go kind of from that area of Huntington Harbor down to Newport Harbor in that zone. There's been some very good fishing along that zone. Particularly kind of up in that Anderson Street area has had some perch up there, palm-sized perch, but a few sublegal halibut have come in there. But when we go south from there, we go to the cliffs, Huntington Cliffs, we go down to the jetties in Newport Beach. There's been some really nice spotfin croaker caught in that area. But in addition to those, there's been striper and there's been halibut down there. And the striper anglers, once again, are looking for those birds working offshore, particularly in the evening, and casting to them with crocodiles, castmasters, swim baits, things that they can get farther out, and they've been catching some of those striper in that area. And then once again, the halibut bite continues to be good all along that Orange County coast, with some legals taken once again on those flukes, those white flukes, and these frozen grunion fished on the Carolina rig. So all of that stuff's worked really well down there, along with some good walleye perch fishing, some barred surf perch fishing. And then anglers are always also telling me that in Orange County, they have had an incredible bite, once again, on these spotfin croaker, not only up in that Huntington Beach, Newport zone, but down in the Dana Harbor, Doheny area, and then San Onofre. All of those spots have been good. And anglers have been using for those spotfin, they've been using soft shell sand crabs, which haven't worked as well because there's so many there, but they've had really good luck on ghost shrimp, and then also market shrimp has worked really well. Taking pieces of raw market shrimp, cutting them into pieces about 2 inches long, hooking that on your hook, burying the hook in them, and using that for bait has also worked really well for those spotfin croaker. One angler called me and he said, hey, I had a fantastic day today, and he once again was using the market shrimp, and he said, I caught a 6-pound spotfin today. And I reminded him that spotfin often come back to the same area to feed for several days, so he should go back the next day and fish there. So he took his dad, went back the next morning, and using the same bait, his dad caught a 4-pound spotfin croaker down around the Dana Point area. So some very, very good spotfin croaker fishing, really up and down the beach. Of course, we're always seeing them also in San Diego. So let's make our way down to San Diego. Now, Pacific Coast Bait and Tackle down there in Oceanside, they not only have great fishing advice for surf fishing, they also sell live surf fishing bait there. So for sure, check out Pacific Coast Bait and Tackle in the southern, very southern part of Oceanside, right off of PCH there. So down in San Diego, really from Oceanside all the way down to Ponto Jetty, that area has really turned on. I mean, there's been perch, corbina, spotfin croaker, yellowfin croaker, halibut, sand bass, all caught along that zone. The only thing I didn't hear there this week was Corvina and stripers, but everything else has been biting along that zone. A lot of anglers are using things like lugworms, bloodworms, soft shell sand crabs, and then once again for those halibut, the white fluke on the drop shot and white swim baits. One angler down there using a pink, white, blue swim bait caught a 30-inch halibut this week right by the Ponto Jetty. So some very good fishing down there in San Diego. Then when we make our way to Black's Beach, that continues to be good at Black's Beach. I know it's a hike, but there's been a lot of yellowfin croaker, perch along there, barred surf perch, walleye surf perch, and some spotfin along that same zone. And anglers are doing really well using live bait, starting out with sand crabs and then using lug and bloodworms and sometimes mussel down in that area. That continues to be really, really good. Black's Beach has probably had some good fishing now for about 6 weeks in a row, and I really don't see that changing too much. So some good sand down there. There's some good areas of sand crabs, and all of that, it's like a giant chum line that brings the fish in. And then last but not least in San Diego, the harbors, so Mission Bay, San Diego Bay, they both continue to kick out Corvina. And a lot of anglers catching those Corvina are not only fishing at night, but they're also fishing hard baits. They're using the Battlestar and the Lucky Craft baits and the Rapalas. These suspending and diving baits at night off of the rocks have done very, very well on those Corvina. And they've been really nice ones, 24 plus inches. I've seen them 24 to probably 34 inches over the last couple months down there. So that continues to be a good bite. And if I was fishing them at night, I'd look for a high tide or a low coming to a high tide at night and fishing at that time. So I wanted to give everybody a tip today about fishing areas where there's a lot of kelp in the water. The first thing I want to remind people about kelp and eelgrass is that when you hook a big chunk of kelp out there, and it can be this big to the size of the hood of your car, as you're bringing in that into shore to get your gear back, you want to do a couple things. One thing is you want to remember is you want to allow the surf to push it in. So you want to reel down on it and be tight to that big kelp ball. And then as the surf pushes it toward you, I normally just walk up the beach and bring the line along with me. And then as the water sucks out, I reel up the line and walk back down toward the surf. I progressively bring it into shore, and I don't pull too hard when I'm bringing that kelp in. I don't want my line to break away from it or tangle worse in it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that's very important is that when you have kelp on your line and you're bringing it in, you always want to hold your rod to the side. You never want to hold it like this, like you're fighting a fish and get a big bend in your rod. And the reason for that is if you have the Carolina rig, for example, or if you have a lure of some type hung up in that kelp, occasionally it will break loose, and in particular if it's a Carolina rig and you're using an egg sinker, that thing will fly like a bullet. And if you're holding it like this, it will come right at your head. And there have been several anglers over the years who have lost an eye or their eyesight as a result of that sinker coming loose or the lure coming loose. So hold it to the side as you're putting pressure on it, reel down and bring it in slowly in through the surf. Never hold it up so your rod is straight up and down and has a big bend in it. That's what you want to remember with the kelp. And then second is really important about, well, how do you fish around an area for kelp? Well, what I like to do is places like San Diego, Santa Barbara, sometimes up in the Malibu zone, they tend to have tons of kelp and stuff in the water at high tide. So often I'll fish those spots from low tide up to high tide. So I'll look at my tide calendar, I'll find out when low tide is. Let's say low tide's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll start fishing maybe about 9 o'clock in the morning when that tide is filled in somewhat, and then progressively that tide, that water will come up the beach. You'll notice that at times, if you look around yourself at that low tide, most of that kelp, a large amount of it that's in the water and swashing around close inside, is actually on the sand now. As that water progressively comes up the beach, those fish will come up with the water and feed on the sand crabs and clams and worms that are in the sand. And obviously progressively more and more junk will get in the water. But from that lower tide, low tide, up to high tide, you'll have much less in the water. You'll have much better fishing at that time. Not only do you not like the kelp, the fish don't like that dead kelp either. The next thing I want to talk about is be sure to sign up for my newsletter if you haven't done it already. Next week, the July monthly newsletter will come out. Those newsletters come out one time per month, and then every week you'll just get a reminder of the surf fishing report. You just click on that and watch the surf fishing report like you're watching now. So don't forget to sign up for that newsletter. It's on the front page of fishthesurf.com. And then I want to remind everybody that the next Grunion Run is July 10th through 13th. I think that's Thursday through Saturday or Sunday. We're going to be back in, once we get in July, and once we get to that first Grunion Run in July, we're back to a take period. So now is the time for you to go down there in July on that 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and collect up to 30 Grunion for you to use for surf fishing or fishing in the boat or fishing in the bay. And I always recommend that take those home, take them out individually and lay them out flat on a cookie sheet or on a paper plate so that they're flat and straight, and let them freeze that way. That way when you hook them and cast them out, and I usually fish them frozen, they will be perfectly straight and won't spin as easily on your line and look a lot more natural. And then last but not least, is if you need any fishing tackle, you need a new surf fishing rod, hooks, lines, sinkers, gulp baits, hard baits, all of those things, you'll find it at surffishtackle.com. So thank you everybody for watching our surf fishing report, and until next week when I see you right here, good luck at the beach.